G'day and welcome back for more Space Engineers Survival. I missed something at the end of the last episode and now it's gotten worse. A few people pointed out that I might not have noticed that the Goose was low on power. And now it's not just low on power, but it's completely out of power. So I'm going to need to build a little transformer box on it so that I can actually move that rotten thing. And then connect it up to the trailer so we can hook it up to the base so we can connect to the base and fix this situation. There we go, one transformer box. Now we have power. Actually, before I get too far ahead of myself, what I might do is also grab the parts so I can build another transformer box on the Butterball's trailer. Since, as you can see here, this connection has broken, and it seems to me that on reloads of the game save, any connectors where one vehicle is unpowered get disconnected. It doesn't tend to happen too often when you're just in regular gameplay. If something was connected and then you remove the power source, it usually stays that way, or at least when you're doing stuff with rotors. But definitely on reloads it seems to fully disconnect. So if I put one of these in here, since it fits, I should prevent that little issue. Except I am going to need to move this over and I don't think I can push it by hand, as I'm pretty sure doing this is not going to do anything. Now I have to somehow figure it. This is always so hard, getting this to work. I could chance it and try and build this thing in half an hour, but I think we all know that building the trailer in half an hour is not going to happen at all. It's going to take me a lot longer than that. Now, what I also do want to do right now is grab this recharge, browse our scripts, and actually update it, because Izzy has come out with a new version of the script. There we go, that's the latest one. And the thing that I wanted to point out about this and why I brought it up is that there's now 3 different modes for not recharging at a connector, or for behaviors with a specific connector. And it's this one that I'm most excited about. The discharge at connector should allow... Oh, what'd I do? What are you doing, Splitsie? It's the discharge at connector that I'm most excited about. The reason for that is it should allow me to do my battery power transfer vehicle using the script, which is awesome. Because it's often a bit of a tedious thing trying to get stuff like that to work properly. Oh, what is happening? Oh, right, I know what's happening. That's what's happening. The the pylons were still down for the trailer. So basically the script would allow for any vehicle that I use that's transferring batteries to drop its power into the base that it's connected to discharge its battery power into the base until its own batteries have 10% of their power remaining. So the thing that's awesome about that is, if I wanted to dump my charge, I can do that knowing that that vehicle can then still be powered by batteries, and by the same batteries that I'm using to recharge the base that I'm connecting to, which is just incredibly cool and super convenient for the things that I want to do. And did I just miss my opportunity to actually connect this? I think I may have. What if I do this? Will these pistons take me up where I need to go? No! No, it's not fair. Oh, actually, before I start getting too excited with moving this, I'm going to do one other little thing. This is very, very cool. With the multiplayer update, there has been a new change to wheels that allows them to be controlled by programmable blocks. Popping another programmable block in here for using Whiplash 141's new subgrid wheel control script. This subgrid wheel control script is a thing because the update has added the ability to have a propulsion and a steering override for wheels. So if we scroll down here, we can see these two. So the programmable lock can manipulate that in time with our other wheels, with our normal controls. So if I go to programmable block, we'll rename this to Goose PB SWCS is what he called it. Edit. And it's pretty simple to set up. Literally, you place the script on your ship, have some wheels on subgrids, place a cockpit, and you're done. Now, when I pop out of here, if I turn, you can see that the wheels on the trailer are moving. Now that's all well and good, but when the trailer is empty, I don't actually want them to do anything, and I also don't want them steering. So we'll turn steering off. But I'm going to create a separate wheel, separate group, which is going to be Goose Trailer Wheels. And I'm going to call it Goose Trailer Wheels because I'm going to use that name for the group on every single trailer. So hopefully the control on my hotbar will be able to stay the same. Goose Trailer Wheels, here we go. Toggle block propulsion on and off. There we go. So I want to turn propulsion off. And now it'll just be like I was driving just before, which is what I'm actually after. We'll just come back in half an hour when I've actually finally parked this thing, because it seems like whenever it's empty, I can't get the right thing to line up with the connector. But when it's full, it's easy. It's very annoying. Oh, this is wrong again. Come on. Okay. So, it would appear that when I dock with the trailer, the Easy script sometimes has trouble knowing that I've docked with the trailer because it's on a subgrid. I don't know if there'd be any way around that though. Maybe I will eventually need to have a separate connector or connection mechanism on top of the Goose in order to prevent that from being an issue. Bugger. That could explain how I managed to allow the Goose to get so low on power. I mean, other than my usual distractedness. My hope with the subgrid wheel control script is that we might look at changing the way this trailer is organized. I don't think these solar panels do a huge amount. Yeah, they're a nice little safety net, but I suspect if we were to add 2 more wheels to this trailer, the extra power that they can provide might be enough, or might be more than enough to make up for the loss of the solar panels in terms of extra charge. And I'm really curious to see if they would be enough to prevent the need for the atmospheric thrusters for braking and not have to use more than just these large atmospheric thrusters at the front. It'd be great to see if we could get up the hill with a full load and not need to use the thrusters on the butterball. It'll be interesting to see, and I will probably fiddle around with that after I've made the salvage trailer, because I'm going to make the salvage trailer with 4 wheels on the trailer part, in the hope that if it's super heavy and it can move, then it'll be worthwhile changing this trailer around. Now, how is our charge doing? Because I do want this to have a decent amount before I move. Okay. Got close to 20% power, which means we've got a full day's worth of battery while we're not doing a whole lot, which is fine. Now let's move into position so we can start building this trailer. What I also want to do is turn those on, and with the rotors I'm going to increase the maximum torque available to this one, and just temporarily let's put that at 0 and let's move this around to there so that we're building on as flat a surface as possible. Move the velocity to 0, put this back to -10, and that should sit there reasonably well. Rotor 3, and I want to move it to 0 as well. That'll give me a fairly flat surface to work from. So what I'm going to do, so that we can recharge the Goose the rest of the way, I'm going to lay out the basics of this trailer, and then once I've got it pretty well lined up to where I need it to be, I'll disconnect and I'll set this over with the other trailer again so that we can get it fully charged. What I'm going to do with the basics of this trailer is I'm going to kind of lay it out the same as the other trailer already is initially, and then we'll start making adjustments to it. But so that the framework is pretty similar, and therefore hopefully the driving characteristics will also be relatively similar, I do want to make it pretty much the same length and height, etc. Pretty sure the other one's 3 blocks high, and then we go back about 12 blocks. Yeah. One thing I have noticed though is I actually made this bit slightly angled here. I don't really want to do that with the other one. I'd prefer it to be flat, so I won't copy that bit of design flaw. Alrighty, and then we'll drop this down to the height of the wheels, which I may just judge off the ones that are here. This trailer is going to be slightly longer, ultimately, than the other one. Is that the right height? I think accounting for the rotor, that is the same height. Alright, so what I'll do is maybe we should... Oh yeah, this will work. If I place some rows of blocks going out each side and then put a piston on each end, I should be able to use that to support this whole contraption once I disconnect it from the tractor of the Goose. Something around that'll give us enough clearance. It's 11 blocks wide for 5. Put that there. Then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Wow, it is wobbling around a lot. So we got a wheel suspension there. Then one on this side, which will be the 5x5 left. No! No, that's not cool. Maybe I can fix it with this. I just want to see if this piston will be able to create enough clearance so that I can add that wheel back in that wouldn't let it... that wasn't able to be placed. There we go. Now, I want to place the extra wheels for this trailer as close as I can to these ones without them rubbing. And I think it needs to go maybe 1 block further than that. Let's have a look. If I place this there, I think that will cause them to rub. I from previous experience. So having 1 extra block of space is probably ideal. The reason I want them relatively close to each other is they're not going to turn, so if they're not going to turn, they'll actually scrub the ground more if they're further apart, I think. It's a pity in some ways that we don't have Ackerman steering so that we prevent a lot of that wheel scrub. Pop this temporary jack down. Now, if I weld up these wheels, we should be able to disconnect the Goose and get it back on charging for the rest of this construction phase, which would be good. Oh! Yeah, that's something I'm going to do, actually. Before I disconnect it, I'm actually going to pop a transformer box down here at the front. It's the last spot I'm planning on building, so I think it's the best spot for me to put something like that, since I'm not going to need to move it in a hurry. And having some power on here will allow me to set up a lot of things that I wouldn't without any. So I think that is a good idea. Alrighty, let's get the Goose off here. I am loving this turntable. Actually using it and having trailers to have a reason for it. I've been waiting to make new trailers for the Goose since I built the Goose. But I've just gotten distracted by so many other things and had other cool things I wanted to do first. But I kind of wish I'd gotten more excited and done it earlier. I probably should wait till the turntable's finished before I get excited and drive off, as it is making my life difficult. Ah! So easy to oversteer with this thing. Ooh, I didn't put the jacks down. Okay. We now have a trailer platform to start working on. And the first thing I'm going to do is actually change up this a little bit and clear out the center. Because the center is actually a block higher than it a block higher than it needs to be, yeah. I want to be able to have just a single row of armor blocks beneath the cargo containers and everything else. That's... Oh, maybe I don't. Actually, maybe I want the suspension to be lower. Yeah, actually, you know what? I was thinking I'd try and make everything like crazy low slung on this thing and have just straight flat armor all the way across here. But for the underside of the vehicle, that doesn't tend to ever look very good. So maybe I won't do that. The reason I was thinking that was I wanted to try and keep the center of mass on this trailer as low as possible, but I don't think it's going to be that much of a problem to have one block higher. So we are going to need a grinder. We're going to need some conveyors, conveyor frames, and large cargo containers. Yeah, that's all for now. So because this is 11 blocks across, we will be able to fit 3 grinders across. And my idea here is to maybe put the grinder about there. Let's see. See if this works out distance-wise. So the first row will be set there, and this next row I'm actually going to set 1 block forward. Don't have a great reason for that. I just kind of like the idea of this top row sticking in a bit further so that it can chomp on stuff that's also slid down to this bottom row. I am not expecting this grinder to do a perfect job and keep everything inside its little pit and also to break down everything. This one I am very, very happy to accept some failures and some... What's the word I'm looking for? Explosive losses or high velocity ejections. That's the term I want. High velocity ejections of material from the grinder pit, which is almost certainly going to happen. So we just have to accept that. Now I need to make sure that all of this conveyor system connects up together. So we'll do 3 of these across there. Another 3 on this lower row, and now the top and bottom rows are connected, so we can then go with a curved conveyor tube there. And I'm actually going to use a conveyor junction here because eventually on top of that one will go a connector. Like so-ish. Maybe. That's subject to change as I lay out the rest of everything else. I'd been thinking for a little bit about what size containers to use on the trailer. And I do want to use the large containers because a single large container is 4 times the volume of a medium container. In fact, we could sort of demonstrate that here and take advantage of the fact that I'm using these straight sections. So instead of those, we could place 2 medium cargo containers and get a little bit of extra storage. So we place 1 there and 1 there. Then we can place a large container onto that. And I think what I will do is put the small ports on the outside like that. And then mirror it on this side. And I wonder, would the design let me get away with that? Or is that going to be too low? I think we will be able to get away with it. It's only 1 extra block, and I sincerely doubt... Yeah, there's plenty of clearance there. I can do that. My hope with this one was definitely to make it have better center of mass. And these containers are 2 blocks lower than the ones on this. So hopefully that'll prevent some of the almost rolling that happened last time. Cool. But that's roughly what I was thinking with the cargo. I don't think I'll need more than 4 of the large containers for this one. I may want it at some point, but I think with all of the weight of components, if I were to place more than that, I'm almost certainly going to put myself in a spot of bother later on. The grinder pit on here is where we're going to run into the biggest design challenges in terms of aesthetics for this trailer. Because it needs to be an enclosed space, I can't leave the cool looking bits of blocks exposed. I have to cover this whole thing in armor. And when most of my designs tend to have exposed blocks all over the place, having an area that's just completely encased in armor ends up looking a bit funny. Plus, there's going to be some big flat surfaces we're going to need to deal with. Let's get rid of those two. And I've got a few ideas of how we might manage to deal with those flat surfaces. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to leave one block clear, then I'm going to place a whole bunch of light armor slopes. So for the back of this, I'm going to have a slope going 45 degrees up from here, and that's going to leave a large flat diagonal surface, which I can't do a lot to in terms of adding extra blocks. So what I might do is add a couple of reinforcement looking parts to it. And that would mean that, then one of those, yeah. And then from this side, let's do both sides as we go so that we get a proper picture of how this is going to turn out. I think this bar across here that then goes up into the slopes will look okay because it sort of looks like it's the axle for that rear set of wheels. Not sure I'm happy with the position I put those lines in. I think I kind of wanted them wider than that, but we'll see how it looks once I actually finish it, rather than getting too wrapped up in finesse just yet. So we'll kind of create a curved, a rounded edge, I should say, along here. And then here's the next big flat area we're dealing with. The two sides of this thing do need to be basically flat to prevent, in order to make sure that the stuff that's being ground down actually stays inside this area, we need to keep these walls tight in against the grinders, and they need to be walls. So we got a couple of ways we could make this more interesting to look at. I thought I ground something off that I wasn't supposed to. Guess not. Couple of ways to make it more interesting. The first is add extra layers of armor onto it to increase the amount of depth that's visible in it. So things like what I've done with the butterball, if we have a look at it, make it clearer. Like these yellow lines, they're just an extra bit of depth. The difference between the yellow and the white areas in terms of height, it creates that little bit of extra detail which makes an area look a lot less boring and, to my mind, match better with the detailed blocks like these cargo containers. And when you've got that right next to a big wall of armor like I've just laid down now, it really doesn't often end up looking all that great. So let's weld this up and take a look at that and see what we can do to improve it. I think we can do things, well, I think we should do things like using battery blocks that have a lot of detail and adding them out the side here on the other side of the armor, and then we can do a little bit of that ribbing sort of stuff. We could also put, if we think we're going to need them, some thrusters for extra boost. If we were going really big, a giant large atmospheric thruster would probably work here, as it takes up most of this space and puts a nice detailed model in place of all of that armor, or at least from the line of sight of the player. The trouble with diagonals is you've got no real attachment points, so it takes a lot more planning and a lot more design work, I guess is what I'm looking for. It really just takes a lot more planning in order to figure out a way that you're going to fit stuff onto that diagonal surface. much easier over here. Now, this spot here looks like a perfect spot for batteries, and I do want batteries on this trailer, so why don't we pop a pair of batteries, one on either side, into this area. Then we'll have a think about what blocks we could put on the outside here, other than batteries. I think we will just go with thrusters, because I can't think of another thing to put on here, and I suspect I probably will need a little extra boost even with these wheels. Since with all the armor and everything else that's going to go in here, this is going to be a pretty heavy trailer. As it has sort of already had its moments where it's wanted to tip backwards. And if I'm going to put thrusters on here, maybe we go with 1, 2, 3 like that. And then I'll do 3 on the other side the same way. And then using the thrusters as a bit of a guide for where we want to do our other modifications to this armor, I can take that chunk out of there, that one out of there, maybe even take this one out of here, and put in something like this, and then some half block slabs, yeah. A couple of half blocks leading up to it. That'll give me some lines to start working with and continuing through the rest of the design to tie it all together. One of the big issues with the detail difference is that this seems like a totally separate vehicle to what's in front, and we don't really want that. We want it to seem continuous. We want it to tie in to, we want them to tie into each other. So we need to continue design elements from one part into the next. There's another little thing we can do with this sort of armor for filling in these gaps and creating a little bit of extra depth without having to add atmospheric thrusters or other blocks to the outside. You can get rid of chunks like this and then put in something like blast doors. This will create a tiny little inset that's much smaller than the gap that's created by the half slabs, and also is a perfectly flat surface to look at. So it creates a bit of variety, or if you place them like this, you'll actually create a window to see through that should be small enough that no blocks will be able to get through. Of course, there'll be those ones that still phase through because they're moving so quickly and the game doesn't get time to calculate the intersections between, or the collisions between the blocks. But it'll stop anything that's actually got time to be calculated, because that gap is so small, but you'll be able to see through it. And because you're able to see through it, it will introduce that depth that we're after with this sort of design. And I kind of want to figure out a way to incorporate this into what I'm doing here. Maybe we get rid of that one and we just go with 2 atmospheric thrusters. And if I get rid of this row entirely, I might even not use the square blast door, but actually use the blast door edge. Like so. Continue this just in one row through here. Oops. Then we'll put a corner at the end. Actually, no, not a corner at the end, because we've got a square at the other end. We'll do the same. I think it's too much with these inset parts. I kind of like the idea in general, but I think it is too much for this setting. If we do something a little bit like this on top of each of the thrusters, and I won't be able to do it below due to the way I've positioned. Oh, yes I can. Oh, no I can't. If I move one of these thrusters either forward or back, I might be able to do that on top and bottom of each one. I think I will do that. Another thing I like about adding functional blocks on the outside like this is that it gives these greebled parts of the armor an apparent purpose of sorts, rather than just being an extra bit of support, which is nice, or at least visually looking like an extra bit of support. They can be attachment points for the thrusters, they could be mounting points for other sort of stuff, and I think that visually, if they've got that clear purpose, it is much nicer. Even with these though, I'm still not entirely happy. I think I'll be happier once I paint it. my idea, just to give you a rough idea, rough visualization of what I'm going to do here, would be for these inset parts to be grey, to really push them a bit deeper into the trailer visually. Oh yeah, just need to do something down here. That's still too much flat space for me. Wonder what we could do. It's a pity I don't design my vehicles with wheel arches, because that'd be the perfect attachment point for them. Okay, I think I've come up with a design around here that I liked. That took a couple of iterations, but I think I'm much happier with this shape. So I feel like what was missing down on this lower edge was the fact that this side was rounded as it got to the bottom, but this one wasn't really. It kind of went square all the way in. Rounding this section by putting 2x1 by 1 bases in, and then changing this gap between the two wheel attachment points, I kind of like how it's ended up. I think it feels like a bucket attached to a kind of default base. And although I'm not happy with this corner here, I think if I put an interior light on each side, because there's that extra block that you'll look at instead of looking at the weird armor shape around there, it'll be enough of a distraction that it should do the trick that I want it to do. Now, what I need to do is I need to massively increase the strength of the wheel suspension so that it clears enough that I can get underneath. There we go. Now we got clearance. So because I've done what I did there, I'm going to actually replace all of this with... Oh, this is where I should use the armor. This is where, see, there we go, night shift brain. This is where I can use the blast doors. I have kind of, I think it'll be kind of cool to have a bit where you can see through to the ground beneath the vehicle. So if we go with just 4 edges along like that. Yeah. From the side, it's an extra little bit of detail. Was I just somehow moving the vehicle by standing between the wheels? I think I just did. Oops. That's going to make it fun to lock onto. Oh, that's going to make it a nightmare. Oh, I can push it. I think I might try and push it back. Come on. What about if I try and push it from here? No, that did not work at all. No! That's going to be interesting trying to fix. Okay, so that's kind of the pattern underneath, which I think from underneath looks pretty cool, but hopefully we won't be seeing too much of that. If we see a lot of underneath, then I've done something very wrong. And from above, it just gives that little bit of extra detail inside this pit. Okay, that's going to be something we're going to have to think about. If I'm going to paint the grey, I'm probably going to need to paint on the inside here as well with grey so that it doesn't look weird looking down into the pit. Something to note. Alright, I'm just going to get this side on. Okay, so that's kind of our bucket for our grinder pit, which I think I'm going to be reasonably happy with once it's all fully painted up. Now for transitioning into the rest of the design. I'm really not happy with how close this is to this wall. I wonder if I can lever this and push it away. Yes! Archimedes would be proud. Okay, I'm going to get rid of this row here and try and design something that's going to suit the rest of this a lot better. What I'd like to do is try and transition from this full armor cover to something resembling more the Butterballs trailer where the armor is pretty minimal. So if I go and put a tip there and a tip there, I might be able to transition this part upwards with some diagonals until it joins with where this line would come through. That might look alright. Let's actually weld it. This is one of those times where, like with the Goose, when I first built it, I'm placing so many armor blocks that it does make it a lot more difficult to really visualize what it's going to feel like. It's odd. When I'm working in small grid, I tend to find it much more difficult to see what things are going to look like finished than when I'm working with large grid. Working with large grid, I could place down a huge swathe of blocks and be pretty confident that it's going to look decent when it's done. But with small grid, I've got no idea half the time. Okay, if that's going to go like that, then maybe we just put one of those in there. Yeah, that actually works because of the bit above it. So if that bit's above it, then maybe I will bring this all the way through to there as well. So I think that's kind of starting to tie this side into the rest of it, like tie this front half into the back half. Then, since I put this tip under there, I wonder if I do this, whether it'll look any good. You know, of course, if I rotate it in the correct direction ever. So if we go with using this as sort of an extra little clasp. Oops, that is not how I wanted to place that. How does that go? Yeah. I like it from this angle. I think it ties everything in, but as soon as you see it from this angle, it looks really funny, so I'm going to lose it. I'm not happy with that at all. And this is the trouble and one of the challenges of working around the large grid, sorry, not the large grid, the large cargo containers. They've got a big gap between their collision box, or between the voxel cubes that they occupy, and the attachment points. So working off them is kind of difficult in terms of attaching things to them and making it look reasonable. You've either got to cover up the whole thing or barely attach anything to it, I find. Maybe something like that. Nice continuous line that comes down. Yeah, that could work actually. All I got to do is just put something against it now so that it's got a bit of extra detail and doesn't stick out like it currently does. It might not need anything more than a couple of these. Okay, I think if we make this all a middle grey, like that kind of middle grey, how does it look? Yeah, so what I started to realise the problem was, by making this one continuous line, I was creating another flat surface. So by breaking it up with this little section in here, and then using the greys to break up the surface even further, I think that works reasonably well. I'm fairly happy with it. I'm kind of tempted to replace this one down here though, with one of the little half slab slope things. Because then this half block width line continues the whole way up. Yeah, that does look better. I'm happy with that. Cool, we are making progress, we are making progress. As you may have guessed, this is not going to get finished today. We are going to be working on this next time as well. I never expected to be able to finish this trailer in one go. It's a fairly complicated build and it's going to need a lot of detail work to look anywhere near what I would like it to. In fact, what I might do with this as well is I'm going to continue it all the way through to the front cargo container. So those of you that have seen the original Goose building Does me holding a grinder to this area make you feel nervous at all? Maybe? A little? Oh! Oh, that's right. I did actually protect myself this time. I did learn my lesson. I swear it. Although I did just grind against very near a block that I really, really wouldn't have wanted to disconnect. But I want to kind of clear out this space under here so that I can get a better idea of how I'm going to place all of these other blocks. I could probably make this shorter, you know? I don't really think I need to have this come out quite so far. Oh wait, yeah, I probably do, because I want to have a lower set landing pad. And then this will be the connector for the base. It'll also be the connector for the vehicle to dump stuff into, but it'll be the connector for the base as well, rather than needing two connectors on this trailer like the other one. Okay, I think I might have been a bit silly with where I put these slopes. If I want to bring this all toward the center, I'm going to need to have some cross braces, and I think they'll look best if they're centered on the cargo containers above. So if I bring the tips to there, then use our half slabs all the way across here. I should also be able to do the same on this one. Oh, turns out I buggered those up anyway. That's convenient. So like this. That brings them into the center, and then I can put some armor blocks down the middle, starting from this conveyor junction. And once I start playing with colors a bit more, I think I'll be able to make this look a lot more interesting. But I'm reasonably happy with the detail work of the armor around there. That does bring me around to the front, where I can then do a similar thing to the other trailer. Bring some armor along the top here. I'm actually going to grind this whole thing off now. I think it'll be better if I place it as I go rather than trying to build around it, since I've got the dimensions I need. Although that was supposed to be higher. If that's the bottom edge, I'm going to need to go with... If we come out to there, then it'll allow me to do this. And have it sort of attached on each side to the large cargo containers like that. Whereas if I brought it up earlier, it would have just been an isolated piece. Since I just need this to become a support for a landing pad, I could then just go with some braces like this. So what I was thinking was something...
Energy low.
Oh, always. So my first thought was to put half slabs across this and make a nice flat, thin landing platform, but then it'd have to be square, or at least square cornered. If instead I make it out of full height blocks, I can actually put curved-ish edges on it, or at least somewhat rounded corners, which I think is probably going to end up looking better. So that'll be the sort of outline, perhaps, of the landing pad. I can almost certainly see myself shrinking it once we get around to building the carrier salvage vehicle that's going to sit on top. Because once I know the dimensions of it, I can kind of cut this down to size. This is almost certainly going to end up being remodeled, but I still can't help myself but at least put something down, just to help me figure out how to remodel it later if I decide to. So it's always easier once you've got a rough gist of what's going to be there.
Fuel low.
Oh.
Fuel critical.
Oh, I almost made it back to the connector before my fuel ran out. Dang it. Now I have to run to this one over here. I actually heard the fuel low warning and thought, oh, I might be able to make it. But no. No, Oh, there we go. That's what I wanted. I was not so lucky. I mean, I didn't die, so I was kind of lucky, but not so lucky that I missed, that I was able to do that. I just realized I did something wrong here. I actually want a small vertical section at the end. Oops. So, what I should probably do is do the top edge first and then do the back edge. So it would be one more square, then a slope, then a square, then a slope in here. Because that'll bring me down 3 blocks, and then from this one I can work backwards to ensure that I've got it right. It was just looking a bit funny having the 2 slopes come together, like this block and this block being right against each other without the buffer. Looked really flimsy, and I wasn't happy with that idea. I'm fairly happy with how this has come together. There are a few bits that I'm not liking and that I will have to adapt and change, which things like this connection here I'm not happy with and needs to be changed. I think I may have made this trailer too long as well. I'll have to see it with the Goose attached to really get an idea. Part of the reason I may be feeling it's too long is that we've gradually moved out of this parking spot. But next time I will get on to building the rotor lid for this and hopefully finishing off the roof and maybe, probably getting a decent start on the lifter / grinder that we're going to attach on top. I'm thinking of a few turrets on top of these cargo containers, a pair rather than just the single one that's on the Butterballs trailer, since this is more likely to be in slightly dangerous situations. We might, depending on how the rotor door goes in here, even be able to fit an extra one in here, but I don't think so, as it'll probably just get in the way of anything attaching to the connector. So there is that, and plenty more to come, and I'll see you then.